Welcome to another edition of PENSDOWN. Today is a special one. I have one of Ghana's celebrated show hosts. I think about the longest running political show in Ghana. The host is here with me today. Very much honored to have him. He is a journalist. I think for almost 3 decades or so, he's been practicing as a journalist. He's also a lawyer. So while practicing, he knows how to stay out of trouble and also how to defend some of his own when they get into trouble. My guest today on PENSDOWN is Samson, Lardy, Anyenini. Thanks for joining me, sir.
You're welcome, my brother.
Your surname, I hope I got it right.
Yes, it's Anyenini.
Anyenini.
Yes, Anyenini.
Okay.
By trying to say Anyen in Twi.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thanks for the education. You've done journalism. In fact, I got to know you when you were a reporter at Love FM in Kumasi. That was when I heard of you. Then so many, let's say, decades ago. So if my calculation of the time I heard of you first is anything to go by, we are looking at almost 3 decades. Is that right?
So I left University of Ghana 2002, 2003 academic year.
Okay.
And I started with Love FM as for my national service.
Okay. Now,
yes. So
how did you discover
a little
the
after
journalist
2
in
decades?
you? How did you discover the journalist in you?
All right. So I often make that reference to a number of people.
Okay.
Whilst in the senior secondary school, I used to do a few things.
Okay.
And I had a friend who kept reminding me that I may do some work in the communications industry, but I never paid attention to that.
Okay.
And then when I was getting done with the University of Ghana, I was a hall president, JCR president for Equafo Hall.
Okay.
We were organizing a blood donation exercise in collaboration with Multimedia Joy FM. And whilst I went around the various halls of residence with a megaphone announcing for students to come out to participate in the blood donation, one of the managers of Joy FM by name Van Dyke suggested that when I'm out of school, I should perhaps consider joining them to do my service with in the media. And so that's how it started.
It's been 2 decades or just a little above 2 decades. When you look back,
that's correct.
Let's assume we are turning back the hands of time 25 years. Are you taking the same course, or there is something else you would love to do?
I would love to do this and do it a lot better. It's been fulfilling. Maybe something else would have taken me away from journalism.
Okay.
But because much earlier, right after my national service, I got an opportunity to work for the BBC and to earn pounds right here, living in Ghana and working from Kumasi. I suppose that is part of it. I didn't think twice about staying in journalism. And then a couple of years after, I got called to the bar as a lawyer, and I had the opportunity of practicing my law and still doing the job of journalism. So I suppose I have had no doubts as to staying in the practice. If it had to be the questioning of financial reward, that was not sufficient enough to keep me there.
Okay. Let me give you an opportunity at self-assessment, which I know ordinarily you will not do. but oblige me this one. The Samson as a journalist before being a lawyer, and the Samson a journalist and a lawyer, which of them would you have wished was your reality from day one?
Oh, that's a trick question. I'll be frank with you. It pays, and you get the opportunity of making a reasonably comfortable life once you work hard at the practice of law. I cannot say the same about journalism. Okay. But I believe that if I have to make a comparison, it will not be the best. But there's a fulfillment that you get in the job of journalism. And so, and thankfully, I have done journalism with multimedia in a manner that somehow in an organization where your output determines to a large extent how much you are rewarded. And it's been good, I'll say so.
In the days that you were actively practicing journalism without law dividing your attention, what stood out, or what set of assignments would you stick out as your most challenging?
Most challenging. Okay, so I can go back to 2006.
Okay.
Whilst I was reporting locally and for the BBC at the same time on the Asawasi by-election.
Yes.
And in the Asawasi by-election coverage, that's the election that brought Muntaka Mubarak to Parliament as an MP. I got wind of the fact that there were foreign ballots that were being brought into the election. In fact, there were 2 pickup loads of foreign ballots that were being brought in. And the difficulty was the safety of my life, my safety, if I blew the whistle on those 2. I didn't think too much. I went ahead and I blew the whistle, and I suffered a bit for it. But I look back today and I'm happy I did that, regardless of the fact that I got brutalized by the soldiers, and the defense minister at the time, Kwame Adolfo, promised that they would do something about the circumstance, and they did practically nothing. Perhaps if it were today and I survived it, I would have sued the Ghana Army.
Wow. We'll be talking some media matters. Since you're a lawyer, we'll be picking your perspectives. Let me give you this for you to think about, well, so that when we come there, you must have developed a thought of 2. Licensing of journalists. We'll be talking about it. I'll pick your thought on whether journalists should be licensed or not. You occupy an enviable and hot seat on the news file, which is a very, 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 very patronized political talk show. In fact, since I started watching in the 90s, Sonny Decker was the host. Along the line, Koku Sechiado came, Matilda Asante came, Nanaya Oforiata, and among others I may not readily remember. Now, your position as a host makes you an umpire of a sort. But the difference you represent from all the others I have mentioned is that you are a referee with an opinion. Samson's take. Or referee with a side, more or less. Now, how does this dual position, how do you manage these 2 without appearing as though you are already in prejudice of how the discussion should go as far as the panel because you have political panel, and mostly they watch you with suspicion based on the issues you are raising?
Well, to the extent that I deal with the hard facts, I give my opinions on Samson's take. I'm often dealing with the law. If you are a panelist and you have a disagreement with my opinion, that's fine. I will not fight you. So that's what I try to do. I just give my opinion, and that's the end of it. I don't argue with anyone who tries to debate my opinion. In fact, what I do on Samson's Stake does not form part of the main issues that we discuss. And I had to introduce Samson's Stake as a kind of a stopgap measure. Our guests were regularly late for the show.
Okay.
The show is billed to start at 9, but sometimes we were playing the jingle over and again, and I found that to be rather boring and disturbing to our millions of audience home and abroad. So I decided that I'll take some 5 minutes, and these days I do between 5-8 minutes. Sometimes I get to up to 10 minutes, and I'm giving that latitude because our audience have come to love it. We have feedback, very good feedback, that very many people, discerning Ghanaians, home and abroad, there are actually some who just want to tune in and listen to participate in Samson's Stake and tune off. They call it the mundane that the politicians get us all into. So I'm very opinionated about what I do as far as I'm doing Samson's Stake, and I'm dealing with the hard facts, the facts that you cannot contradict. And so I'm fine with it. In fact, when I started earlier, I got criticism that, oh, your predecessors didn't do anything like this. They didn't show an opinion and so on and so forth. I said, well, I'm not my predecessors. I took over from Kweku Sechiado. And they said, well, we'll measure you against Kweku Sechiado. I said, well, Kweku Sechiado is a mentor. He handed me my BBC job, but we are not the same. Okay, apart from the fact that I'm a lawyer and he is not trained as a lawyer, we are not the same.
Wow. Your take on Lee Kuan Yew, where you looked at the Singapore story and then you drew parallels with Ghana's. You were talking about the fact that we should take a second look at sanctifying the corrupt by electing them into office as more or less a way of blessing them to have access and, you know, latitude over our public pairs and all that. But, you know, Ghana's situation is quite an interesting one. We are stuck between two political parties. I don't know whether to call them the devil and the deep blue sea. Wherever we turn, there are issues. How do we navigate into calmer waters, you know, in the midst of all these?
There's a lot of disappointments, and it's very obvious. Sitting stage to have conversations with the people who, you know, have Ghana at heart. Elder statesmen, very ordinary people, people at the very top, you know, both in and out of government, will reach out to me. And in the conversations, I am better for it. I get enriched. And so I look back and I assess things. I've read many philosophers. I've read many political leaders of the best of examples. So reading from third world to first world, Lee Kuan Yew's work, it intrigues me as much as it gets me to reflect on our circumstances. And so this is actually my second Samson Stake, in which I look at what he did with Singapore and a basket case, you know, of a third world, an economy that was written off completely, an economy that at independence we were proud to say we were better than, you know, Singapore. And now look at the difference. And I see the clear rules that were set out and the questions of integrity, character that characterize the politics in that part of the world, which is enviable, which is admirable. And so if I look, for example, that Kufuor comes into office and he says, we don't have affordable housing. Let's try and do some affordable housing. He spends our money, taxpayers' money we actually don't have.
Yes.
And begins such a laudable project. The MPP loses office. Kufuor is done. NDC comes in. They abandon it. Then they start their own STS, and we know where it ended.
Yes.
Something that started out to be a clear, corrupt project just to benefit the political leaders, And where did it take us? Then, Akufo-Addo comes in. The projects that the NDC also started, including the Saglime, that we have sunk, millions of dollars into, they abandon it and begin to give excuses that some corrupt conduct has gone in there. We need to prosecute people. Yes, prosecute them, but the project is already there. We must take the benefit of it. And then we are doing new projects again. All of it, money we don't have. So it breaks the hearts of many people, and they interact with me. And I can see some of these things myself, that we do not have a policy, a plan that we are all, running with. And so the politicians come in, and we can see what they have done largely. You can't see the decent incremental, development. And that is very disturbing. And we need to do something to change that kind of politics. The winner takes all. And today I continue to talk about the corruption. And if you follow me, you discover that most of and conduct that can be said to be a clear rape of our state. There are people that we know today who are very wealthy.
Yes.
Who can call themselves millionaires. But only 7 years ago, they didn't amount to much.
Yes.
And we know how they have become as rich as they are. If the NPP loses power today, businesses, they have businesses that don't amount to anything. All of a sudden, their businesses will be the ones that you will see their hands in almost every government enterprise. And overnight, they become wealthy. And we must continue to ask questions, that we cannot allow this to continue.
Your time before 2006, when journalism was your mainstay, was there a time in the line of duty that you were offered something, material or monetary, to either dilute the facts of any story you were doing or completely trash it and take it?
That's a very important question. And I've had the occasion to be very plain about some of these things, except that the references I have made over the period have been to Manasseh Azora-Awene, who is a journalist that I represent. To the extent that he had stories, groundbreaking stories, stories that could change, the face of things and bring improvement. And people, went after him to give money and decided that it is his lawyer that they could reach out, they could get to him through. And made all sort of offers, very big offers. He didn't have a vehicle, he didn't have a car. He was riding a motor, bike. They made offers to give him cars, and he was completely disinterested. And I drove all these people away because I told them, I couldn't even approach him to ask him that this is what you are offering. And in the first place, I wouldn't do that. And some of these people are still around, and I have spoken about these things publicly. And so I believe that they know that it's difficult to attempt to get to me and to suggest to me that I have to do things in a certain way to take a benefit. Thankfully, when I started my practice, I don't know, I didn't set out with a setting mind or policy, but you would have been told that in the newsroom in Love FM, I would go out, gather stories, go attend to programs that at invitation of organizers, and I will not wait for their usual TNT. I won't wait for it. Some of them had to bring the TNT to the Love FM places and ask my editor that they want me to take that, and I will tell them I was not interested. It didn't matter how much was being major parties, NDC, NPP. People within those the parties reached out to me and told me that they had discussions and concluded that I could not be compromised. And so I think from the very beginning, it's been, I have set that rule, and so they are unable to approach me with such things. They can approach me and complain that I have done some things, I have said things that hurt them, hurt their party, or hurt government. But once you approach me, if you have superior facts, if you are able to, as it were, give me alternative facts that are true than what I deal with, I'll accept them.
But on the hot seat as the host of Newsfile, maybe nobody has attempted to bribe you over one issue or the other. Have there been some behind-the-scenes shenanigans, maybe even with suggestions to your bosses that somehow you are too difficult, they should change you, or you are a troublesome head, you are difficult to deal with? Sometimes one will say you are favoring this side, the other will say you are favoring that side. What have been some of those, behind-the-scenes maneuvers against the seat you occupy?
We have had the two major parties have to, come to meet management and suggest that they should have better representation on the show, asking for, a certain kind of particular representation on the show. But it has not been particularly about me being the host. When it comes to my job as the host, there have been a number of issues, very few, that a particular government or opposition feels that I have a certain view on the particular issue, for which reason they think it is unfair for me to host. But they get it wrong, because even when I have a view, I don't stifle the alternative view.
Yes.
I may express disagreements. If there is, an attempt to peddle non-fact, then I'll hold you to the fire. That's all. And so, unfortunately, they have not been successful. When I have to take a stance, for example, Kennedy, Japan, have been very disruptive, and he will spew, what is non-factual, and get the people to sue the media organization. And when you ask him to provide the facts to assist for the defense that the media organization has to put up, he doesn't have anything to show, and he would come in and insult on set. So I had to take a decision to say that I'm not going to host if they ever brought him, my producers ever brought him on the show. Well, the parties will not be happy, but I cannot be bothered. I believe that we have a job to do as media people, and for anything at all. There have been people who have come on the show who have said things and have been found out to have peddled falsehood.
Yeah.
And once you are found out to have peddled falsehood, or you have conducted yourself in a manner that clearly breaches the rules of the game, and I demand that you retract, you apologize, or that you accept the alternative, the true facts of a situation, and you don't. And I have had to walk people off the set, you know, because I believe that we have to be strict. Otherwise, in this country, the way the politicians think that they can have their way on the media, if we continue that way, then we can't have any progress.
In the midst of all these, have you been threatened physically by anybody? Maybe one of the panelists on the show, during the show, he felt you did not treat them fairly. Afterwards, they want to knock you off a bit or say something to you. Do you receive such?
I have had cause to even take lodge complaints to the police. But I am aware that I have to also be responsible for my security. Particularly when you have dealt with very sensitive issues, where you have spoken in the most blunt fashion, where a political grouping believes that their representative is above being questioned in a certain way, and I have held them, you know, they are put to the fire and they are unhappy. I can expect that some of these ugly stuff, you know, will happen. So there have been situations where, particularly during election, you know, periods, where the myself and my home is appreciable. So yeah, it's, I mean, just being the lawyer for journalists who have had issues and need representation in court, or need to sue the police or sue the government. I have taken those on without fear or favor. And so people, the people on the fringes, they are not, I know that they are not particularly sponsored by, to issue threats. People have called me very early in the morning, you know, issue threats and insult me, but sometimes you'll admit that these are part of the job. Yeah, they come with the terrain, so you must just be ready for them. I only feel a lot when those who have to reach out to me and are the people, you know, at the top. And those, I can count the number of times that has happened. So I trust that sometimes those people are also reasonable, because once you meet them with the facts, they begin to appreciate that they may have been wrong in the first place.
You mentioned money. You go to cover an event and there is money in envelopes. On this show, I have gotten the surnames of various countries for the same thing. In Ghana, we call it Sole, which is like the shortened form of solidarity. In Nigeria, it is called the brown envelope, the same in Cameroon. In fact, in Cameroon, there is, I think, a French version, which is gombo. Down in Malawi, they call it logistics. In Liberia, they call it professional services or cattle. In Gambia, they call it brown envelope. Now, it appears this is a practice which is a subculture of journalism in various parts of Africa. It is only somebody based in South Africa that I hosted who said that such a practice does not exist there. Because over there, journalism is seen as a serious business. You are paid well, and matters of corruption are frowned upon, no matter who you are. Solly, what is your take on Solly?
Solly is a no, no, no. And I know that the multimedia group that I work with, it's prohibited. It attracts the ultimate sanction, dismissal. And I know it's also the same with perhaps a number of media organizations, but people still find a way around it, most unfortunately. The thing is that, you know, it's certainly corrupts you. It does not help you to be able to exercise an independent mind, an unbiased mind, in the way you will do your job. It compromises you. And I think for those who are in that habit, sometimes it's easy to tell the way they will go about their particular programming. Sometimes even the manner they go about their selection of the guests, the panel for a program, it shows that they are not independent enough. Some of them you can predict what they would do in the course of the week, depending on what news comes out. And I believe that our audiences, the listeners and the viewers, have become discerning and can tell a compromised journalist, media house, or practitioner from one who is not compromised. For some of us, for example, what we do, if you are in the pockets of the politicians, you clearly cannot do it because they are devious. They will expose you. They will tell their people, oh, he was here, he took money from me, he did this from that, I did. They will say it, and they will use that, they will blackmail you. You know, so if you must be independent and to do your work and do it well, because the job of a journalist is a very serious one. And the way our Constitution, you know, guarantees it, it tells you how serious it is. That in our Bill of Rights in Chapter 5, we make the job part of the fundamental human rights and entrust a lot of work in the hands of journalists. And they are supposed to be sort of reflect the voice of the people. And then we spend the whole Chapter 12 guaranteeing journalists all forms of freedoms and, you know, prohibiting the criminalization of what the opinions, you know, editorial opinions of journalists. So it tells you how serious that is. In Chapter 12, Article 162, Clause 5, which is one of my favorite, that we practitioners in the mass media must at all times, that's the language of the Constitution, at all times, be free, be free. Being free includes independence of mind, functional and personal private independence. Be free to uphold the responsibility and accountability of the government to the people. The people must depend on us. We must be free to check, you know, what the wrongs and the ills that go on in society. So if you yourself, you are corrupt, how can you then, you know, be the one to help to resolve the matters of corruption, which have impoverished our citizens, that we have gone back to the IMF how many times, and we can't seem to see our way clear. The Auditor General's report, 5 years of the Auditor General's report, Occupy Ghana has done an assessment and found that monies stolen and misused for 5 years amounted to more than twice what we are at the IMF today seeking.
Wow.
3 billion United States dollars. And we can collect these monies. So that's why me, do my show, I moderate, and then I still step in to join the Citizen Ghana movement, the coalition, including CDD, Ghana Anti-Corruption Coalition, the Ghana Integrity Initiative, to hit the road and to demonstrate and to demand from the Auditor General to issue surcharges and disallowances against all this theft. Which money, if we had protected, we would not need to go to the IMF. No, those who give us money say that every year, 3 billion United States dollars is unaccounted for every year. I mean, that's so criminal. It's shameful.
Yes.
And our journalism must be elevated to appreciate that these are the difficulties that our people are in. The people are in poverty. Look at what the economy is now. Rising prices. People can't afford a square meal, you know, because the politicians are impoverishing us, the leaders. They're impoverishing us. So you must be independent enough to be able to look them in the face and tell them that you are a thief if they have stolen. Yeah. Recently, look at what happened. And I did one of my takes about that. That Kolebu Teaching Hospital RENA unit.
Yes.
People cannot have dialysis. It was shut down for only a couple of weeks because the hospital owed 4 million, you know, Ghana cedis. Within that same period, our one political party, 2 individuals seeking to become president, to win their primaries, they spent in excess of 120 million cedis buying votes.
Yeah.
If you are compromised, you can't sit on a national program like mine and tell them that what they are doing is criminal. And some of them, we know that the source of their money is not clean, and we should tell them, we should tell it as it is. So I have no qualms at all. Look, we have only one life.
That's right.
If you target me and you do anything to me, I believe that I would have played my role required of me in this democracy.
Now, I want to step into your family. Is your immediate family comfortable with the kind of vapor your work generates?
They clearly are not. But I must help them to understand that I've heard of several names, the Mensa Sabes.
Yes.
They were not old people. They were young. They were youthful. I'm 48 now.
Yeah.
When the Sabes began to do the things they did to propel our total independence, they were not my age. They were younger than me. So we should step up to the game. It's as simple as that.
The Constitution has beautiful guarantees for the media. Juxtapose that with our reality. Is freedom of the media what we are experiencing in Ghana?
And there's a good amount of the freedoms that are guaranteed in the Constitution for journalists to practice. But there have been excesses, attacks, and we have to speak to them, particularly in this regime, and I make no qualms whatsoever. The murder of Ahmed Swale continues to remind us that journalists will be afraid for their lives. I have had to lead Erastus Asaridonko, whom you just interviewed, to the Ghana Police Service to make a complaint because he was threatened by the same person who threatened Ahmed Swale, expose, you know, disclose his identity, and Ahmed got killed. Wow. And we are in this country and we are pretending as if it's okay. We can move on with our lives. You know, I spoke about this not too long ago again. How many 8 people died in the last election.
Yes.
8 people were killed in the elections. There ought to be a serious commission that would have been probing that circumstance. There's nothing like that. What is their lives worth? So journalists get threatened, and the people who were manhandled, some of whom were maimed, included journalists.
Yes.
There's a journalist who is, a number of journalists who presently are struggling, so to speak. They are doing everything to defeat premature death because they have been battered, they have been brutalized by not ordinary citizens, but the security.
Yes, police. Latif Abubakar comes to mind, who was beaten
Latif
right in
agrees.
front of the police service headquarters.
Exactly. I am in court making a case that he ought to be compensated, you know, for what happened to him. There must be a pronouncement by the court to the effect that this is what happened. It was wrong. Modern Ghana journalist, Emmanuel
Ejiofor.
Ajafo. Yes. I represented him. The national security denied that they had picked them up from their workplace. They had put polythene bags over their face and took them into detention, you know, without access to their lawyers, and manhandled them. They denied it. When he was bold enough, and I kept faith with him, led him to the court. Eventually, they had to come to the court to concede, and we got judgment for him. You know, so there's a lot I see.
Yes.
That does not inspire me to speak too favorably about the terrain. But I know enough to know that those are isolated incidents, except that the number, you know, Media Foundation for West Africa has been chronicling some of these.
Yes.
And all the times, it is the security agencies that are most at fault. Why should it be so? They must be protecting the journalists. They are paid to protect the journalists. As you and I speak today, I'm getting ready to file a case in court because during the Occupy Jilobi House protest, 2 journalists were manhandled. 2 journalists were assaulted. There was one gentleman who was doing your normal social media kind of, you know, journalism.
Yes.
Who was beaten. They inflicted wounds on his body. I'm going to court to file a case against the state for these things, except that we have not been too pleased that often when we go to court, you win these cases, and when you win the cases, the compensation amount is often too small. It's not inspiring.
Yes, it's not deterrent enough.
Yes, when Sechibia, you know, was beaten by this woman, what is her name again? Hajia Fati.
Yes, at the NPP headquarters.
That she went there to cover, you know, their election processes, and she was beaten. When she was asked, why did you do that? She says, I mistook her. I took her for an onion seller. Is an onion seller not a human being? We went to court. How much was she giving in the end? Not more than 10,000 Ghana cedis, you know? So these things, they are not deterrent enough. You will expect that when these things happen, the criminal prosecution will be such that it will bring deterrence. But often the criminal prosecutions are not taken so seriously and they fail. So we have to resort to civil processes. So I know enough to know that there are situations where the terrain has not been the best. But I do not use that to say that the freedoms guaranteed under law in the Constitution, we do not enjoy them as journalists and media in this country. We enjoy them in the large measure. But these ugly developments need to be properly taken care of. And you need the right sound bites from the very top, beginning with the president, the man who led in 2001 the repeal of criminal libel.
When I hosted Erastus Asaredonko, he said it is his desire to have an interview with the president and then find out whether he sees the reports they are doing about how Galamsey is wreaking havoc on our vegetative cover, or he simply doesn't care. From where you sit, you deal with, of course, they will not be friends. They are newsmakers. You are a news presenter. The jobs are always cut out, but then you deal with them. Do you sometimes pick snippets that the president or people at the very top know what exactly is happening, the things going on in the media and all? Because we were in this country when Professor Mills, as president, called into the Super Morning Show one morning to make a correction when his own spokesperson was live on the show saying something. If that is even a sample size, then we can say for a fact that the top is not completely decoupled from the reality down here. What do you think is accounting for this inability to act, especially when journalists pay the price of putting their life on the line to do some of these groundbreaking stories, some of whom you are even defending in court?
Well, the occasional opportunity where the journalists could interact with the president directly and ask him questions, as if it's been cancelled for a number of years now. The president has not, availed himself for the media to ask him any question. He's gone around in regions, and then you will find him in a studio. And then unfortunately, somehow very disappointing how when he avails himself of those opportunities, I don't want to say the class of journalists are not up to the scratch, but to the extent that they can't seem to ask the questions.
Sometimes downright sycophancy and bootlicking.
Exactly. And when you look at some of those media houses, they are media establishments by party people. So sometimes it's not surprising, though. Look, and again, you bring me to make a reference about Singapore, and we know how they fought corruption and fight corruption.
That's right.
Here, those who fight corruption are fought by the state and state actors. That's the most unfortunate part of it. So the special prosecutor is under siege by the government and its people. It shouldn't be so. They should be the one to see, to help and, promote the special prosecutor's work. The special prosecutor and his staff were not paid for about 16 months. How do you expect them to work and work well? The things they needed, in terms of the facilities to be able to work. Look at the Cecilia Abinadapa matter.
Yes.
That, someone in government can keep in excess of $1 million under her bed.
That is a loan we are going to look for somewhere.
And the president will issue a statement, say that he is confident that the person will be exonerated. Exonerated of what? Why are you trying to stampede the process? All of these don't, bode well. Daniel Yao Domelevo, the Auditor General,
that's right,
who Occupy Ghana secured a judgment of the Supreme Court to give the Auditor General teeth to bite.
Yes.
And he began to issue surcharges and disallowances. Once he issued same against the senior minister over the Scroll and Associates,
That's
the
right.
Scroll and associate, stinky deal. He was targeted, and we know he was removed
booted
from
out.
office. We can't say it any other way. Yeah, and I am proud to be part of the civil society that agitated that this was wrong and supported the civil society that took the matter on in the court, except that the matter was not decided in good time enough. And there are countless of such situations that you see that does not give you a sense that our governments want to fight corruption and galamsey, which is a corrupt activity, the way it ought to be fought. Look, and I say, for example, if this happened in a decent country, this is the way to fight galamsey, and they know it.
Yes.
We know that the people high up are involved in the galamsey.
Yes, because the cost of one excavator is not something the man on the street can afford.
Exactly. So that even Professor Frimpong Boateng, who was given that job as a minister, comes out to tell us how bad the situation is. He's being hounded. The people in government or associated with the government are suing him left, right, center to frustrate him. He has some form of evidence to the state. And how does the state treat the evidence? Okay? It is not sufficient. I know if we have submitted something that is not sufficient, don't you have a part to play?
Yes.
We just rubbish it and say, no, it's not sufficient to get conviction of anybody. So that's the end of the story. So, if you ask me, I'll say it's difficult to say that the president, when he said he would put his presidency on the line, over galamsey, really meant it. Because if he meant it, and I were president, I know how to go about this. We have many suggestions have come out. The DCEs for these mining areas.
Yes.
Give them that job and give them timelines. If it is found out that illegal mining is going on in your district, you lose your job. The people, the real kingpins behind galamsey are not arrested. It's just these hungry hirelings, who are arrested and prosecuted and put in jail. And we are told about the numbers of such people who are arrested. And yet, galamsey is not coming down. The cyanide is polluting our water bodies. People are drinking, and Erastus's project will show that we are dying. We are dying. And what else could be the job of a president than to step in and to ensure that this stops? You have the whole of the state apparatus and state power behind you. If you can't stop galamsey, tell me what else you can do as a president.
You said earlier on that when you fight corruption, the system fights you. And indeed, Erastus made a very startling revelation. The environment minister sent them. He was part of a task force that was sent to one galamsey site, that is illegal mining site. For those of you who may not understand what galamsey means, to an illegal mining site to stop what was going on. They got there, and in a matter of minutes, they were surrounded by trigger-ready soldiers, over 30 of them. They pick phones and make calls to the minister, to top military officers, and all of them are powerless and helpless.
We saw one of such footage when he went to one of those forests. And they shot at their vehicle. They tried to destroy, the vehicle that Erastus and his team were in. So it's a sad
For instance,
commentary.
Manasseh Azuri Awuni. Manasseh, when I hosted him here, he says he lives like a fugitive. I am sure now that he's in the United States, he might feel much freer to move about. because he was telling me on PENSDOWN that even going out to sit by the beach with your family is a problem, because you have to keep looking over your shoulders to be sure you are safe. Erastus Asaridonko also finds himself in a similar situation. He said there was a time he had to move his entire family to a safe house for about a month because the clear and present dangers had gotten so close that he needed to do something beyond just the normal protection he had taken.
And you remember that Manasseh had to be smuggled out of the country to South
mentioned
Africa
that
for a
too.
while.
Yes.
And from where I sit, let me be frank with you about this. For somebody like Manasseh, the expose that he has done, that has led the country to recover millions of Ghana cedis.
Yes.
And the bigger multi-million companies that are behind some of these things. And it continues. Just for being his lawyer, he is a guy doing the job.
Yes.
I can tell how much risk he faces. Just for being his lawyer, what I have had to go through just for being his lawyer.
That is you, not even the subject.
Exactly. Tells me that life is not easy for the young man. Such a person ought to be protected. Well, the state attempted to give him some protection, but sometimes you cannot be too sure about how these things work.
Exactly. You might be walking into the open arms of the very enemy you are running.
Most unfortunate.
Let's look at political ownership of the media. We have a lot of politicians that have set up media houses, politically exposed persons who own media establishments. Our democracy is still at the baby stage, more or less. Are these kind of developments healthy for us? Do we have a reason to be worried, or there's no cause for alarm?
You see,
indeed, let me add this for context.
Right.
Shortly after the 2008 elections, two of such politically owned countries radio stations nearly sank the country with such, reckless broadcasting and everything. What is your take on the political ownership of the media?
The Media Foundation for West Africa's media monitoring of, indecent language,
yes,
language that also inflames,
yes,
continues to identify these particular, brands of media organizations and their presenters, but what do we do to them? That's the problem. If you take Japan's media,
yes,
or Man FM,
yes,
if you take the other ones for the NDC group, Radio Gold, of course, when they came under the pretext of enforcing certain regulations, they shut down Radio Gold.
Yes.
But we have other, pro NDC media that have, come up.
Yes.
Even pro, they are set up by their own people.
That's right.
Just to do that kind of job. Look, I know that a media house can take, if you like, an ideological stance.
Okay.
And still do a professional work.
Yes.
Except that in our circumstance, it's different. They throw ethics to the dogs. So it's worrying. It's worrying. So there ought to be a process to sanitize that. But you see, they belong to these major political parties. So attempts to sanitize will not reach them.
That's true.
If the NPP decides to clamp down on such media, you can be sure that it will clamp down on the opposition media.
Yes.
If those in opposition NDC, they win power and they decide to clamp down, you can be sure that they will clamp down on the NPP media, which will be opposition media at the time.
Yes.
Even critical media government has sought to attack critical media. That is not necessarily media set up by politicians.
Yes.
Now, you know, we began a process to introduce a broadcasting bill.
Yes.
That broadcasting bill has, you know, straddled various parliaments, but it's never seen the light of day. We have the one that we dusted, there was a 2010, and I think we picked it up 2018, dusted it again. The reason they will not pass that bill to regulate and sanitize, bring some sanity into the space, include the provisions that seek to prohibit politically exposed persons from owning media houses.
Oh.
Yes. Politically exposed persons are not going to be giving licenses to run media organizations. And that's the biggest problem. And that's why that broadcasting bill will never be passed.
In Africa, social media has created richer bloggers than richer journalists. You said earlier on that social media is a minefield for journalism, or is an opportunity for journalists. What is it that we, the trained professionals, are not doing right? Which is why scarcely trained people in the use of mass media platforms are exacting the financial benefits to themselves.
So people are looking to the media being, for example, being critical and not be compromised.
Yes.
If they can get that with somebody who can, you know, who doesn't need any license to operate.
That's right.
They will follow them. And they will get the audience that will bring them the opportunity to advertise and make money. And there's a lot of it that you can see on the social media.
Yes.
People want to see responsible journalism. Very responsible journalism. Journalism that is development oriented. So if they are not getting that from mainline media, and there are guys who will step up to the plate on social media to do that, why not? So I believe these are some of the reasons you can clearly see the bloggers or those who are the bloggers prospering. And why not? If you do a good work, you will be rewarded. It's as simple as that.
Should journalists be licensed?
That's a big question. I had the opportunity of chairing a committee set up by the Ghana Journalists Association to review the constitution of the Ghana Journalists Association. And the very first issue that we had to confront was whether or not to license journalists. I am of the school that there can be a certain, you know, we can do it in a certain way. But be careful not to use the licensing regime to frustrate, you know, those who should be given the opportunity to be in the area. So we can do some sort of, you know, a tier of the licensing regime, if you like, so that people who do not have, because normally you will consider level of education.
Yes.
Now here we have local language, as it were, media,
yes.
people using our indigenous language.
Yes.
And some of them, they don't need your formal education.
That's
All
true.
they need is some bit of training,
yes.
to know how to use the tools, and to do the gatekeeping role, and they will be able to perform. So even if we have to, I say we can do it in such a way that we will not make educational credential certification the overriding consideration in such a way that certain people who could do a good job will be cut off.
A number of colleagues have expressed fears and reservations about such a suggestion. I remember the publisher of the Trumpet Media Group, which is based in the UK, Mr. Femi Okutubo, when I hosted him, he agreed with me that the politicians we have in Africa are smart, and they can easily smokescreen themselves behind the licensing bodies to exact vengeance on critical journalists. Indeed, when I hosted Manasseh, he said that for somebody like him, he might never be licensed because some people don't even like the shape of his nose in the first place, you know, and licensing, the introduction of such for such people will be the best opportunity to deal with him. Are these not downsides to any possible attempt to license?
So Oliver Bakavomawo has said, for example, that if he started his Fix the Country activism before, while he was in law school, or even before, he may not have gotten entry to the law school, and he may never have been called to the bar to practice law in this country.
It looks obvious.
But what is his crime? His crime is that he's demanding accountability. What's wrong with that? So I agree. There is the downside to almost everything. There are lawyers, even though the legal profession, we have a fourfold duty. Okay. Duty to the profession, duty to the court, duty to your client, and then duty to the citizens. Many lawyers are behaving as transactional lawyers. The duty to the citizens, they relegate to the background. So if you have lawyers who are vocal and want to, participate in public discourse in a manner that holds, governments to account and duty bearers to account, like Martin Pebu is doing, like right. Kofi Bentel is doing,
yes,
then, the fraternity begins to look at them, in a certain way, and their licensing, which is renewed every year,
yes,
maybe in jeopardy if they don't conduct themselves in a way, that accords with the criteria set.
Yes.
So I agree with such views, but I think that if the licensing, the regulations are to be made by us, we can make them in such a way that they take account of the dangers. That's my belief.
In journalism, what stands out as your golden memory or your golden memories, if it's more than one?
Oh, in very recent times, when it has to do with my work, the expose I had to do about the National Cathedral at the very start is something I do not regret, and I won't regret it. We're a poor country. You cannot just get up, say that you had a dream and you went to have a prayer with your God. I am not godless. And you go have your private contract and want to use the public, funds to do that, and do it in a way that there's no even room for checks. That is clearly something we must stand up against. Demolishing 1-year-old, 3-year-old,
properties,
6-bedroom bungalows for judges. When there are barren lands, bare lands that could be used for such a project. It's something I will be against any day. When the president, decided tokenism, that had to go to a referendum to decide on vote a yes or no for districts, MPs to be elected.
Yes.
And opposition also, I was the one who began the campaign, really led the president to, as it were, cancel the referendum, which was a needless referendum, because the provision in the Constitution that needs amendment for elected to become an elective office does not require a referendum, does not require us to go waste money, except that he wanted it to be on a partisan basis. We have suffered enough. The partisanship is killing this country, and we don't want any more of it. I look back on such moments where I took up a crusade and it got, a groundswell of support and led the whole president to estimate that he will lose the election and canceled it. They are some of the things I look back to, and I feel proud that I can contribute in my own small way to this improving this democracy and accountability for governance.
Are you doing journalism for life?
I clearly will not do it for life. I will check out at a point, but I believe that I would have made such substantial contribution that I will be able to look back and say, we played our part.
If tomorrow your own child or some mentee walks up to you that I want to become a journalist in future, is the person getting your blessings? If the person will, what is it that you tell the person to do differently once they get inside?
They'll get my blessing 100%. And I will guide them to, first of all, grow their personal integrity. Because I believe that is the foremost that they need to have, personal integrity, to get in there, so that they will not be compromised, so that they can do something that is, worth their lives. I hate journalists who don't read. I hate journalists who don't prepare for the work that they have to do. I dislike journalists who will just carry the microphone as a conveyor belt and anything will go and report he says, without taking the pains to check what they need to check. And in this regime, to use the right to information law. And I'll say that's one of my, what you call the golden moments, that I took an active part in championing the right to information law and civil society deemed it fit to make me the face of the campaign towards the passage. I am proud any day I look back on works like that. And so, like I said, I don't like lazy journalists.
Right.
They are hosting, for example, show hosts, hosting shows, and they have read practically nothing about the subject they are hosting.
Yeah. Attrition in journalism. These 2 decades and a little you have been here, so many colleagues, some of them very highly trained, qualified, experienced, have abandoned the ship. They found themselves in various sectors. They are still living, even as we speak.
Including politics.
Exactly. Exactly. What do you think accounts for this high rate of attrition journalism is suffering?
First of all, I believe that the reward system can be improved.
Okay.
I've known many journalists who moved on to become lawyers, and they just checked out. They just checked out because the salary of a journalist for a whole month could be one consultation session for a lawyer. And so, you know, the incentive is not there.
Yes.
You know, so I think that can be improved. We need quality, not quantity. So media owners, media managers, and there's also this unfair practice within the media industry. The best and well-paid journalists find your typical host of shows.
Yes.
That's, you know, that give them the numbers. When the reporters who are going out to bring in the news don't get paid even a quarter of what some of the show hosts get paid. I think there's a need to rationalize that kind of system.
There are even show hosts who are poached with 4-wheel drives as baits.
Exactly, the point I was getting to. And I have represented some of them as lawyer. So, and I know, you know, they can, you know, overnight get a house, get a car, and get some, you know, a lump sum and a 6-figure monthly pay. You know, just to host a show. Yes, it's not that they are not worthy.
Yes,
it is because they have done, you know, what brings them that kind of earning, but
that's right.
It can be rationalized a lot better than we see it today. It can be discouraging for editors, you know, who are the gatekeepers. You know, looking that somebody just does a morning show and doesn't do anything beyond that. You know, and an editor is coming into the newsroom from morning, perhaps to evening, and will not get a quarter of that, what that person gets. Not just the salary, but also the conditions of service. So I think media owners may want to look at that too.
Let me wrap up with this personal one about you. I think you mentioned earlier that you were a president for one of the halls when you were in University of Ghana, if I got you right.
I was the JCR president for a Kwafu Hall. When I was in law school, I was also the SRC president at the law school as well.
Now, what is it with you and student leadership? Does it come to you naturally, or you so believe in leadership that whenever the opportunity comes, you want to avail yourself?
So when I took up the leadership for the SRC at the law school,
yes,
I was already working.
In fact, on that one, I remember a number of times we heard your voice in the media, speaking on behalf of the students on certain issues.
So there's something I'm going to tell you, and people get surprised when they hear it. So for all the time that I was the president of the Ghana School of Law, SRC,
yes,
I set up my office. I brought in my own printer, my own, computer, and we did a lot of things that involved traveling and so on. And I used my own vehicle. I fueled it myself. And I set up committees. Committees were set up for week celebrations and so on. And everybody gets an allowance. But for myself, I denied myself not one cedi, because I believe that student leadership had gotten to a point where there was no longer trust. And that student leaders were using those platforms to enrich themselves, and they were even getting corrupt. And I felt that we could show some example to inspire that kind of leadership. So that's what I did. If you ask at Akwafu Hall when I was JCR president, I led a number of initiatives to the point that some presidents of other halls began to question that we were doing things that student leaders were not supposed to be doing. And they would say, we are paying fees, we are paying user facility fees. The university should be responsible for the things we're doing. And I took a different view. And we did those things to bring a certain different meaning to student leadership, to show that we can be responsible. And that started with me right from when I was school prefect in Asanteman Senior Secondary School.
In Kumasi.
So yes, please.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so,
I also went to a popular school, so.
All right.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So
now,
I believe we
presidents
can give some example. Yeah.
SRC presidents at the tertiary level are viewed as implants of politicians. Let me use that word. In fact, when I was in Ghana Institute of Journalism, I witnessed how some politicians bankrolled certain candidates for student leadership. During your own time, maybe let me ask the obvious question. Were you bankrolled by a political party? If no, were there, what do you call it? Was there an approach by a political party to support your campaign, which you turned down?
So this is exactly the reason I decided to dedicate myself to get into secular leadership at the University of Ghana. For the most of my life, people have known me to be in spiritual leadership, Scripture Union. At University of Ghana, I was with the University Christian Fellowship, and I was in the leadership. So I was actually not known within the student political circles. So when I launched out, people were surprised, and people said I won't get anywhere, because just from the blue, I just spring up that I want to become JCR president. And there have been people who have been there who had, worked their way. I went around speaking to the people, and I won by over 70%, almost 80% of the votes.
Wow.
And I was not sponsored. I didn't need any lavish campaign. All I needed was my voice and my ability to walk to the rooms of the students and speak to them and get them to appreciate what I would do. and I lived up to the things I told them I would do. We had a big issue with water supply.
Okay.
And I said I would drive a fundraising to raise money to resolve that problem. We did it. We did a number of things for the hall and so on. It was during my presidency that I got approached by a politician.
Okay.
Who was in parliament. And wanted me to mobilize the students for a certain political purpose. And you can tell that I declined. Yes, I did. So I know that student leadership has been infiltrated by politicians. And these days, it's very ugly. They don't even have a voice anymore. They are not respected. They are not respected at all. When they are issuing statements on national issues, you can clearly read how it's partisan, and so that is a worrying trend. And I will encourage a lot more independent-minded people to take up student leadership, to try to change that kind of narrative.
My last question. If you have the president, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, 5 minutes on Newsfile, what 2 critical questions would you ask him? Just 2, 5 minutes.
So this is a president who made a lot of promises to improve our country's, economy.
That's right.
I clearly will be interested in interrogating him on what, he has brought our economy to a level that, has imposed so much hardship. And the recent survey, the statistics have shown how almost 1 million people, 870-something thousand people have been pushed into poverty. Yeah. I clearly will have questions for him on the corruption fight that I believe he has lost, and how he has not given the right pronouncements to improve, the landscape of independent and critical media.
This has been PENSDOWN. One of the most exciting. The questions can go on and on and on, but this is a very busy man. I have been chasing him for only God knows how long, and thankfully today he did us the honors by joining us here. And it's been exciting. That is him, Samson, Lardy, Anyenini. He's the host of Newsfile on Joy FM, one of the longest running political talk shows in Ghana. Every Saturday from 9 o'clock to 12. So many dials are logged there all over the country and beyond. And this is the man in the hot seat who throws the questions north, south, east, and west. I'm grateful for your time on PENSDOWN.
My pleasure to be able to share with you. And I've been following the work you have been doing. I think it's phenomenal.
Thank you.
And it is of such fundamental importance to be able to deal with some of us the way you do, and draw out of us as much as you do to help particularly young practitioners, and even those who may not have clearly appreciated the enormity, the onerous job of media practice, to step back and reflect and think about how to do it, and do it, better. When I follow, I also pick quite a lot of learning to improve what I have to do. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, sir. Truly grateful for your time. This has been Pens Down. Here, we talk
always.
journalism journeys. The pen is the tool of the journalist. On this show, we say pens down because this is where the reporters and presenters drop their pens. That is the working tool. And then they become the newsmakers. We turn the tables. It's only here. It is global. Wherever you are, you can catch up. Thanks for joining us. We are back next week with another edition, and we'll have another colleague join us. The menu will still be the same: journalism journeys. Bye for now.